The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello and welcome to The People's View. My name is David Schoneman. I'll be your host on this episode again today. On People's View, we take a look at issues that are important to you, the voter, whether it's on a national, local, or state level. We like to look at what's happening in our government so that you can be informed when you vote. And this is a big week. We're leading up to our next municipal election, which will be next Tuesday, November 5th rather. And I'm joined today by two candidates for the Board of Aldermen who are running to fill some important seats here. Welcome. I've got Kevin Scully, who's running for Ward 6, yes, and Kevin Avard running for Ward 2.
Thank you for having us.
Glad to have you here, and welcome. There's a lot going on in city government. I think a lot of folks at home don't understand the importance of what happens locally. Both of you have served in Concord. You were a senator and you were in the State House. Yes. A lot of experience, but a lot of things that happen up there we don't see or feel on a day-to-day basis. But what happens here in Nashville, we see and feel on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
I was on the Board of Aldermen, too, a few years ago. One of the things that we always had to deal with was spending. Mm-hmm. We had a spending cap. 25 years ago or so, a spending cap came into being because the mayor at that time, who happens to be the same mayor we have now, Mayor Donches, spent a lot of money, and people at home felt the burden of taxes going up. If you spend money and for government, taxes are going to rise. So taxes rose, and in an effort to protect the folks, a spending cap was implemented, and it's stood the test of time up until the current administration, again with Mayor Donches, and there was some manipulation of the spending cap, court cases, and it ended up failing in the courts. The court said our spending cap is unenforceable. Now, as you both know, you've been around Nashville for a long time. A lot of folks supported that spending cap. It's very, very important, and suddenly that protection is gone. But you're running to try to make sure that the folks at home have an advocate on the board. Tell us about your candidacy and how it relates to the spending cap.
All right. Well, thank you. Kevin Scully here, former state rep, as you had mentioned. And it was funny, I was up in Concord and we were sending money back to the city. We did understand what the city's needs were. The mayor was keeping us informed of that. And we were doing our best to make sure that we could help lighten the load of the taxpayers that are here. But the best way to lighten the load at the end of the day, as you said, is to control the spending. And it is rather ironic. I point out to people that, again, the spending cap was ruled unenforceable by a court, not by the voters of Nashua.
Right. Very important distinction.
The voters of Nashua wanted that in place. We have always benefited by having that in place because it forces government to prioritize. If they can literally decide, without a spending cap, government has a blank checkbook. They can decide to spend money on basic needs or frivolous items. And they can turn around and say, well, boy, that really adds up to be a lot of money. I guess we're going to have to raise the taxes on everybody. Right. So the spending cap forced that fiscal discipline, the same type of fiscal discipline you and I have when we sit at our dinner table with the checkbook and the bills. We all have the limitation of what we have coming in.
Right.
We put that limitation on the municipal government. It was put in place for a reason.
Right.
As you had mentioned yourself too. It didn't just happen out of nowhere.
Right.
We saw what happens when our government is unrestrained and spending gets out of control. And what I would say is I'm very cognizant of that. I am very concerned about that. And I would say this is a very, very important election because now it does matter who you have as your alderman.
It does.
True.
Without that control in place.
Because the cap's no longer there. That protection that could be in place no matter who was occupying those seats as the Board of Aldermen is no longer there. So now it becomes vital. Kevin, let's hear from you.
Well, now the Board of Aldermen in the past, though, when the spending cap was there, a lot of you folks, when you were in the office, when a number of you were, Mark and a number, you lived by the spirit of that.
Yes, we did.
And I think what we have to do, as Kevin and I want to do, is live by that same spirit, because now we have to do it manually, right? The courts aren't going to enforce it. Some people said, well, it's not enforceable because the wording of the law was, you need some adjustments. Well, okay, so let that slide for now. In the meantime, we can come up with new language, submit some new language if necessary, but there's 7 of us that are running that want to keep that spirit going. When I'm knocking doors, I'm seeing these dacha signs all over the place.
Right.
And I'm thinking, why are these dacha signs all over the place when he's running unopposed? And I think the people that don't have the signs are very cognizant of this. And the reason I say that, knocking doors and seeing dacha signs, and then, well, lo and behold, people coming to me and saying, well, you're running for alderman, right? And I said, yeah, and I want to keep the spending cap alive. And they said, yeah, but you have Donchis in there. And I know that. That's why I'm running. And,
right, exactly.
And they're encouraging me because they're sick of the spending.
Yeah.
Neighbors are tired of their taxes going up. They're tired of hearing. Recently, my opponent basically mentioned that there was $80 million for new school funding or some type of construction going on. Talking to some of the Board of Education individuals, it's not 80 million. It's 125 to 135 million.
We heard that last week. We taped the show last week as well, and I was surprised at that number. And this kind of spending is being contemplated in the face of declining enrollment, and performance that is
statewide. It's not just Nashua.
Right.
Derry. I was talking to an alderman from Derry, and nobody wants to hear that. They want to spend more and more money.
Well, it becomes an investment in the status quo, an investment in this, the educational industrial complex, really. That's what it is. And that's alive and well here in Nashua. And I think there's got to be something done about that.
I was just listening to a debate with Victoria Solomon. She's running for mayor in Manchester. And of course, the charter school issue became an issue.
Sure.
And of course, the mayor says that the sitting mayor says that she supports it, but she doesn't want to hurt public schools. Well, that's a contradiction.
Right.
And it's disingenuous, and it's not serving the children. Why?
They're not trying to serve the children.
They're not serving the children
themselves.
because the charter schools are public schools. Right. They are geared to individual learning rather than the
factory school.
Well, someone would call it that. And I think when the kids fall through the cracks, then you have an opioid crisis because they don't fit into society. They're not getting into the mainstream. There are whole factors that go into this opioid crisis and people falling through the cracks. And when a child is going through school and is not getting the education that child needs, they're going to get attention somewhere else.
Right.
It's going to be a video game or it's going to be something else, and they're going to be disenfranchised. And that is wrong. Right. And so I think, we need to look at the whole education system as a whole. But it's not just a new building, especially when enrollments are down. So I think people are very concerned about their property taxes. They're concerned about bullying in school. They're concerned that they're not being heard, and there's just like a one-party system here in Nashua, and nobody's listening.
That's essentially it. And I think that taxpayers, one of your constituents will have an opinion A or B, and you have to vote on something A and B. Some are going to like A, some are going to like B, and you're not going to be able to satisfy every single person.
No.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. It's impossible. And I found that, of course, when I was an alderman too. But what I discovered was that even if that person, if I was not voting in line with that person's thought, if I respected their opinion, listened to it, had meaningful conversation, let their opinion influence my thinking, which is very important. I didn't go in locked, this is how we're going to do it. I wanted to hear from folks what they thought we should do. And I think that if we show that respect to them, if we listen, if we respond to their needs, then even if we don't vote their way, we can still have their support. Because I think people realize that we can't do both A and B in that particular example.
Kevin, I think you and I both learned that from being up at the State House, is that when you're in a committee, you're listening to all sides.
Yes, absolutely true.
Right.
And I think it's important to ask the right questions as well. One of the things I noticed from going to some of the Board of Aldermen meetings is actually how few questions are being asked now. It's usually they're putting forward a proposal, somebody will second it, there is no discussion, and everybody basically votes
they just
yes.
do it. Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, I'm not even saying that most of the decisions they're making are wrong. What I'm saying is that I think it's very important that critical questions be asked so that we can really be sure that we're doing the right thing here. And the voters at home know that we're doing the right thing.
People watch those meetings on TV. It's a wonderful service that Access Nashua here provides. All these meetings are televised.
Yeah.
And folks at home do watch. And the conversations that we have there, even if we had thought about it a lot in advance and we knew kind of what we wanted to do, those conversations that we have on camera are very, very important. And people need to know that we're actually thinking about these things. When I was on the board, it was not uncommon for a meeting to go 2 or 3 hours. If it was budget season, I looked at the clock. Sometimes it was over the clerk's desk, and it would be heading towards 10:30, sometimes in the evening. That's a long night. It's a long night, and we'd come back and do it again the next night. Those meetings were very long. What I hear from the guys who run the cameras now for those meetings is that 15, 20 minutes, they're done. And that's not good. That's not serving the public. That's not serving the people.
Well, I think part of the reason probably why you had to work so hard was because we had the spending cap in place and it forced people to prioritize with a limited resource.
Yeah.
Once that restriction is gone, it is so easy to just say, well, you know something, that's hard. Why don't we just do both? Just whack one thing on top of the other.
Kevin tapped into one thing that's really important. When you're in government, asking the right questions is key. And sometimes you have to ask the crappy questions. You have to ask the hard questions. You know that you're going to get either resistance from the mayor or other aldermen, but you still have to get up there and ask them. Why?
Right.
Because you represent your neighbors. You represent the people. And when you ask those tough questions, you got to gruel through it. And that's why your meetings were longer. Mm-hmm. If everybody's just voting lockstep, which seems to be the trend.
Happens a lot, yes.
In Nashua, then, the people's voice isn't being heard.
No, we have to have conversation. And it isn't that we're going to necessarily make the vote go our way.
Right.
But by virtue of the fact that, even though I was in the minority on that board, by virtue of the fact that we had different thoughts represented, there was the opportunity to ask questions. Right. And when there's questions, opportunity to ask them, I'll ask the question. And I think you guys would too, because that gets a conversation going. And you know what? Folks at home are going to understand the quality of the answer that's given to the question, even if the vote doesn't change.
Right.
When you ask a question, why are we doing this? And the answer is, well, because, folks at home are going to know that's not a satisfactory answer.
Well, I'll give you an example of one thing that happened at one of the alderman meetings that I was watching. And Alderman O'Brien put forward a proposal to spend $50,000 to upgrade the fire study to determine what the needs of the fire department are for the city of Nashua. And it was $50,000. I think he made the proposal, Dowd seconded it, and they all just voted yes. And I was sitting in the audience wondering, don't we have a fire commission? An elected fire commission of 3 people who are dedicated to the fire department? Why would they not be doing that and then bringing that study or recommendations to the aldermanic board to vote? Why is the aldermanic board spending $50,000 to do what I consider to be other people's work? Now, it may be at the end of the day that what Alderman O'Brien did, again, what was the right way to do this, but nobody asked that question. And boom, $50,000 was spent. And, you start adding 50,000 and 50,000 and 50,000, suddenly you're talking about real money here. So I think it's important that or should I be elected by the voters of Ward 6, I will be in there asking those critical questions to make sure that if we are going to ask, to reach into somebody else's pocket, we've got a darn good reason for doing so.
Right. Now, like I said earlier, that there's 7 of us that are running, and there's 7 of us that would probably call ourselves fiscal conservatives. Mm-hmm. And I think that might go against the tide. We're not going to be in the majority, but we'll be able to explain to the people what's going on in your local government. And I think that's critical. I know that I'm listening to a lot of people. I'm in homes every day in Nashua. They are concerned about their property taxes. They're very concerned about the bullying in school. They're not seeing anything happening.
Yeah.
It seems as though the bullies get to stay, and
a lot of this is swept under the rug.
Yeah.
I don't think that's right at all. There's something else that came up. We heard about it. We aired the show last week, and I'll just give it a brief story. But these are the things that folks at home should understand. There was a quiz given, a math quiz, and the quiz had the student fill out a formula and come up with an answer. It implied that there was one answer. And based on the wording of the question, that one answer was provided. There's actually, the way the teacher saw it, there was a part A and a part B, and those two answers had a match. And anyway, the student answered it one way and was docked some points for that. And it ultimately escalated up to the principal of the school. The parent escalated this. And the logic that came back was that, well, since most kids did it this way, this is the right answer. Even though the student made a very logical argument that her answer to this particular quiz question was correct. And I've seen the question, and she was right. But what we have going on in school is this sense of groupthink that says, well, if most people agree this is correct, then that is correct. And I think people at home need to understand those kinds of things are happening. This is being swept under the rug. They don't want to address it or face these kinds of things. But there's a lot going on in Nashua that people at home aren't hearing about. And that's very unfortunate.
Well, I tell you, we have the unfortunate distinction of being the Fairgrounds Middle School is the place where they had the videotape of that one girl assaulting, mugging another girl. It was horrific. And again, what I saw was the way this is being handled.
Very poorly.
It's awful. I mean, they said, to your point, they basically told the parent, well, we're not sure we can protect your daughter. Maybe you should consider moving your daughter out of the school. Not the people who actually attacked her. And what type of message does that send?
I was talking to Tracy the other day, and we were,
Your wife, Tracy.
My wife, Tracy, and she scrolls through Facebook. She's not really a political animal, but someone posted recently how that she lost her daughter in Nashua a couple of years ago, and it was due to bullying. She committed suicide.
Yeah.
And so why aren't we doing something?
Yeah. Well, I think there's this desire to preserve the status quo, preserve the system, not rock the boat, because they don't want negative publicity, and they want to believe somehow that everything is fine, and it's not the case. There's a lot of things happening in Nashua that really need to be addressed or not being addressed. I hope as you guys get in, you can do that. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about some of the priorities, about the necessity to set priorities, especially when we have a spending cap. When I was there, I spoke about priorities a lot because the others didn't want to. They want to do everything.
Right.
They just want to do everything. But you have to make a choice. And the way I looked at it, I think I said that public safety was number one. I think that people don't want to sleep with bars on their windows. Public safety, I will lump fire and police together for public safety. Secondly, I thought it was good infrastructure. You got to be able to drive on your roads and not have your felons come out when you hit potholes, because you have to get to work, right? You have to get to work. So public safety, infrastructure, and then things like trash collection and snow removal and all this sort of stuff sort of falls under that. It's public works. And then you get to schools down a little lower. These first three things affect everybody who lives in the city. Schools affect a much smaller portion. Schools are important, but we know that there are options to schools.
They're a big part of the budget too.
And a huge part of the budget. It's half of the budget. The budget. Tell me what you guys think is the priority hierarchy that you would use as an alderman.
I wouldn't say, I'd say ditto, honestly. I mean, those are some of the biggest priorities, and looking at the rate of spending. But that's the job. That's pretty much in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's funny. Honestly, you've given my speech in terms of what I believe, but that's very true. When I started thinking about city government and services, what do most people need the most and the most often? And you could go right down that list, and you really hit them all on the head. The irony is, if we're doing those jobs correctly, nobody notices. And it's wonderful because, I mean, you just get on the road, you get to where you want to go, the road's plowed, it's in good shape, you get there. You know, your police are doing a good job. You don't have the break-ins and, you know, so you don't notice when all the good things are happening. The trash gets picked up and it's gone
Sure.
when you know, and I really would like to have a very boring ward where everything is running smoothly and like clockwork.
We certainly want to have that.
By the way,
And I think I want to try to make that happen.
I love my plow guy. Sherry Ann Ave. I got a little cul-de-sac with a rock wall, and this guy manipulates this big machine on such a small area, and he gingerly does a great job. So some people are doing really good work.
They are doing a great job.
Yeah.
I think the guys who drive the plows, my son likes to see the big green trash truck that comes by. And
Yeah.
so when he hears the truck coming down the street, you know, we go out and watch him, and he does a good job of it. And he interacted with the driver, which my son interacted with the driver. The driver, you know, interact with him, and it's nice. I think the guys over at the landfill, I think, do a good job too. One thing that disturbed me as an alderman was that one of the highest priority items, road paving, which should be part of the operational budget in my mind,
Every 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
fell down to a very low priority. And that's why we got into the jam that we got into. And then we had to actually bond it. And the bond is a long-term bond. The bond is probably we're going to be continuing to pay that bond when these roads are no longer serviceable anymore.
People
So we're
need to
gonna pay it.
understand about the bonding and how it affects their tax rate. One other issue that I wanted to jump in on really quickly was, you know, I have served as a city councilor up in Franklin. That's where we got the state's first tax cap. I was actually the deciding vote on that. But I also served on zoning and planning. And it's come to my attention that we at one point had a city engineer,
We did.
and now we don't.
We don't. And this is critical.
It is critical.
We had a very, very good engineer. We miss him tremendously. He did a great job here.
When we talk about local government, you understand that, well, when people see new houses, that's not going to lower taxes. That's going to create a need for more services. So when you see these high rises going up, more services are going to be required for those new housing. And instead of encouraging more housing in Nashua, which it seems like we have plenty, we need to encourage more business development to counter the property taxes. And we're seeing, you know, where BB Rubber used to be, that's now a new housing complex. Where there was a skate park, that's a new housing complex. The hangar building is
Henry Hanger.
proposed to be a new housing. More and more housing requires more and more services, requires more and more taxes to provide for these. And that's an issue that needs to be addressed. Because why did something change in the zoning board that people didn't realize, or in the zoning laws, or weren't these businesses at one point?
They were businesses, and I think that to try to cram more housing in there is not the best thing to do.
And that's subsidized housing.
Much of it will be subsidized housing. I don't know if it'll all be subsidized housing, but I think some of it's going to be subsidized housing. And the location you talked about, the hangar place and the Corvo lumber down there too. Those are in areas that there's not a lot of good road access. I mean, there are roads there, but they can't handle a lot of traffic. As it is, there's a lot of backup on those. And our city engineer, by the way, was bringing that to folks' attention. So we can't just do this without studying what's happening with the traffic. Now, I'm sharing a story that I heard secondhand. I didn't hear it firsthand.
No, secondhand's where it's as good as a whistleblower.
I guess it is.
Sorry about that.
Right, it is. So it's secondhand knowledge, secondhand story. But my understanding, and I certainly can believe it, knowing the engineer that was here, that he was very concerned about the city growing in a manageable way and doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that his effort to analyze before jumping forward met with some resistance at City Hall. And that's why he's no longer here, which is really unfortunate, because we've seen a lot of things happen in the city where there's a jump and then an analysis. I think the Burke Street property is one. The Art Center could be considered another. There are a lot of things
Is
that
that
are
14 that went to
done.
22 million or
Yes,
something to that
exactly.
effect?
So I think if you guys get in there, you need to keep a close eye on those kinds of things too. But we need to look before we leap. I think that's one of the things that the engineer would have done, and hopefully we'll find someone new. I don't know if we'll find someone who's doing a good a job as he did.
Well, the other thing I'm concerned about, I mean, you know, and when people say that, you know, you need subsidized affordable housing, who doesn't want to help the other person? But at the end of the day, to create affordable housing, it basically means that somebody else is going to have to pay part of that bill.
Right.
And what I don't want to have happen is our current homeowners, in order to create somebody else's affordable housing, make their housing less affordable. And that's what I'm concerned about.
Especially, a lot of problems with the assessing department these days.
Yep.
I was going to bring that up. So what's going on with that? We got another $1.3 million worth of that the city is paying for new assessments. When I hear about new assessments means they're going to come into your house and they're going to raise your taxes. And only one alderman, and it wasn't Rick Dowd, voted against it.
Yeah.
Now Rick Dowd is running against me, or I'm running against him. But it's like, why? Why are you doing this? Why are you punishing the landowners here in Nashua, or the property owners? Why are you punishing them and reassessing their properties? And what happened with all that? Why wasn't it done the right way the first time?
There were a lot of problems, and we have a citizen here in the city who is really doing a lot of investigation into that. And I think we haven't seen the end of that. There's more news to come. But the money's being spent on this new assessment, and it really should be spent on getting better management in there, I think, to really manage this department. Guys, we're almost out of time. We mentioned the fact that there are seven candidates for 7 different seats. Board of Aldermen, of course, is 15 seats. There are 9 seats, ward aldermen, and there are 3 at-large that are being challenged now, too. Not challenged in case of the at-large. But let's run through the wards. Ward 1, we have
Mark Cookson
running. He's got a great experience on the board. He's very responsible to taxpayers, very responsive to taxpayers, and he's going to do the best he can.
Very analytical in his thinking.
Very analytical. He knows how to manage the systems and how to manage.
Ward 2, Kevin Avard. Yay.
Ward 2, Kevin Avard. Nice going. Excellent. Ward 3, unfortunately, is unchallenged. Ward 4, we have Art Craffey, who's offering a new voice. He's been on the Board of Aldermen as well in the past. I think he brings that experience. He would be good. Ward 5, we don't have anybody.
No.
Ward 6,
Yours
Kevin
truly.
Scully. What does your sign look, Kevin? Real quick.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Folks, you've seen in Ward 6, you've seen these signs.
It's the little
This is
sign.
the man we're talking about right here.
Yeah, it's an open seat basically because
Yeah,
our
good for you.
alderman's stepping down, so I'd love to step up.
Ward 7,
That's
Drew Sullivan.
Drew Sullivan.
Drew Sullivan. He's a vet. He was in the military, if I understand that correctly.
Yep.
And I think he brings a strong desire to serve his fellow citizens. Very, very important. Ward 8.
Dave McLaughlin.
We have Dave McLaughlin,
Dave McLaughlin.
another experienced alderman. I think he'd be great on the board. And Ward 9, we have Bill
Bill
Ohm,
Ohm.
And
also someone who's experienced in the
I
state
wish
house.
Bill Ohm would have run for mayor. This is the most qualified guy that I know, and is very level-headed, very analytical, and a very kind guy.
All right.
But vote for him.
And Board of Public Works, my wife Shannon Schoneman is running. And, I joke about wanting dinner, I have to put in a plug for her. But she's very responsible. Yeah. And I think the Board of Public Works needs to have more of a voice there, too. Folks at home need to know they're represented there, because that's another rubber stamp kind of a board too often. We don't want that to happen. So Shannon Schoneman, the Board of Public Works.
Don Davidson, right?
Don Davidson, Fire Commissioner. Yep, he's former mayor, very experienced in the city. Yeah. Yep, I think he'd be a good choice there too. Okay. And of course, we have our school board. We've had school board folks on before. We have a whole slate of people there. Again, we need some balance on the school board.
Yes.
Exactly.
So anyway, thank you very much for coming in. I really appreciate it. Best of luck next week. We're going to be hoping and praying that there's a change in the city of Nashua. It's going to be up to the voters to make that happen.
Exactly.
But thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Glad to be here. And folks at home, thank you for watching too. Thank you for tuning in. My name is David Schoneman. You're watching The People's View. Please get out to the polls next November 5th, next Tuesday, November 5th, to vote for your candidates who will represent you in City Hall. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.